All right, so let's swing into this deep dive on Spider-Man: Homecoming.
Sounds good.
You sent over a ton of stuff for this one.
I did.
Production notes, marketing plans, like even some fun trivia stuff. So we're going way beyond just like, is this a good movie?
Yeah.
And looking at how they actually made it.
Right.
Especially, for someone like you who is so into the whole filmmaking process.
Yeah, absolutely.
And speaking of how it's made, I got to ask, where's the spider?
That's the thing.
Like the origin story?
That's actually where we start, right? This film, it just skips the whole Spider-Man origin story.
Yeah. And at first I was like, hold on, isn't that like Superhero 101?
Sure.
Like you got to see Uncle Ben, the spider bite, the whole thing.
Of course, yeah.
But watching it again, I actually think that was a genius move.
I think so, too.
Because we jump right in. Peter's already Spider-Man. But he's like a total newbie at it.
Oh, yeah. He's figuring it out as he goes.
And it lets the movie focus on something we haven't really seen before with this character.
Right.
Like Peter trying to navigate high school life on top of figuring out these superpowers.
Yeah, it's almost like a superhero coming-of-age story.
It really is.
Yeah.
And they nail that awkward teenager thing so well.
Oh, they do.
Like just high school on its own is a whole universe of stress, right?
Absolutely.
Now add in trying to hide superpowers and impress Tony Stark.
Yeah, no kidding.
I think I just, spontaneously combust.
You'd be a mess.
Oh, totally.
But that's the thing, the movie doesn't shy away from the humor in that either.
Yeah, definitely.
But it also, it makes you think, is this how a teenager would actually react if they suddenly got these abilities?
Right.
Like, there's a layer of realism there that you don't always get in these big superhero films.
For sure.
Yeah.
And it's not just the story. The casting was, the notes say continued even after production started.
Yeah, that's right.
Which sounds a little chaotic to me.
It can be. It happens more often than you'd think.
Really?
Yeah, but it definitely adds pressure.
I bet.
Yeah, but in this case, they ended up with a really diverse and talented cast.
Oh, yeah.
Which I think is another thing that sets this film apart. You've got Tom Holland. He brings this, youthful energy to Peter Parker that's perfect. And then, Michael Keaton as the Vulture.
Oh, yeah. Got to ask about that.
He is not your typical villain, that's for sure.
I mean, was it intentional casting Batman as a villain in a Spider-Man movie?
Right.
Like, that feels too perfect to be a coincidence.
Well, it's definitely a nod to comic book fans, I think.
For sure.
And it adds this layer to the Vulture, right? Like, Keaton brings this weight to the role. He makes you question, is he really the bad guy here? Or just someone who got pushed too far?
Right, it's more complex.
Yeah, it avoids that simple good versus evil thing.
Which is always more interesting.
Definitely.
Now, you can tell they put a lot of thought into this production.
Oh, for sure.
Like, even down to the location, they filmed in Atlanta to recreate New York City.
Yeah. Yeah, movie magic. It's always a challenge recreating these iconic places, But with Homecoming, they went all out. Like, they built a whole working replica of the Staten Island Ferry.
What?
Yeah, in Atlanta.
Wait.
And they could flood it, thousands of gallons of water in seconds.
Wait, seriously, why?
It was incredible.
Like, they could have just used CGI for that, right?
Oh, absolutely. But that speaks to their commitment to practical effects.
Yeah.
Whenever they could do it for real, they did it for real.
Makes sense.
It creates a more believable world,
Yeah.
For the actors, for the audience, for everyone.
Yeah, if you can do it for real, do it for real.
Exactly.
Okay, so something else that kind of surprised me. They used Sony Pictures ImageWorks for the visual effects.
Right.
Which they'd done the previous Spider-Man film, so I figured that was the obvious choice.
Sure, yeah.
But according to these notes, there was some hesitation there.
Yeah, the executive producer, Victoria Alonso, she was looking for something different for this film. Like a fresh look.
Okay.
A new visual language.
To set it apart.
Yeah, exactly, from the other Spider-Man movies. But ImageWorks, they really stepped up. They did some test footage that was incredible.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Blew everyone away.
So they had to, prove themselves.
Pretty much. They had to show they could think outside the box, even with a character they'd worked with before.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's impressive.
Uh-huh.
And speaking of thinking outside the box, let's talk about the director, John Watts.
Okay.
These sources say he's big on this thing called pre-visualization.
Oh, yeah. Previs.
And I gotta be honest, I'm not really sure what that means.
So it's like storyboarding, but way more high-tech.
Right.
It's basically like making a rough draft of the movie, but in 3D.
So they're animating the whole thing before they even film it.
For the complex scenes, yeah, like all the web-slinging action. Watts would work with this team, and they'd basically block out all the action, camera movements, the whole thing, but in a virtual environment.
Wow, what's the advantage of that?
Well, besides saving time on set,
right,
it lets them experiment. Like, they can try different camera angles, different ways for Spidey to move, things you just can't do with traditional storyboards.
It's like choreographing a dance, but for a superhero?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, so let's move on to something that's all about timing and hitting the right beats.
Okay.
The marketing campaign.
Yes, the marketing.
They did this whole multi-platform thing, right?
They did. They were all about synergy and cross-media convergence.
Hold on. I'm picturing a Venn diagram, and in the middle is Spider-Man selling me a Happy Meal.
You're on the right track.
Okay.
Synergy basically means all the different parts of the company, like Sony Pictures and all their marketing partners. They all work together to promote the film. And cross-media convergence is just using all these different platforms to reach more people.
Gotcha. So like that app they had with the augmented reality.
Exactly. Yep. Or partnering with companies like Dell.
Oh, right.
Yeah. They were weaving a web for sure.
I remember messing around with that app for hours.
Me too.
Trying to catch virtual Spider-Man in my living room.
Yep.
And then there were the Dell laptops, like right there in the movie.
Of course, product placement.
So that was all planned.
Oh, absolutely. It's not just about slapping a logo on something. It's about integrating the brands into the story.
Okay.
So it feels natural, even beneficial to the story.
Right. Like, yeah, Dell laptops in Peters High School.
Exactly.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah, it reinforces that this is Spider-Man for, like, the digital age.
It's subtle, but it works.
It does.
And then you have the trailer, which, I mean, everyone was talking about online.
Oh, yeah, they nailed the online buzz.
Like, it felt like they really understood how to use social media to get people excited.
They knew their audience, that's for sure. For sure.
The trailers, they were designed to be shared, to become memes, to get people talking.
It worked.
They'd release little snippets, behind-the-scenes stuff.
Yeah.
Just enough to get you curious, but not enough to spoil anything.
And everyone was trying to guess what was going to happen.
That's right.
Based on, like, 5 seconds of footage.
Oh, yeah. They turned the marketing into an event.
Which makes sense, because the movie itself was huge EE.
Oh, massive.
$117.03 million opening weekend.
Just domestically, yeah.
I mean, wow.
It was the second highest opening that summer, after Guardians of the Galaxy Vol. 2.
People were ready for a new Spider-Man.
There were, especially one that felt connected to the whole Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Right. It felt like a whole new era for the character.
It did.
And speaking of changing things up, all that success led to some awards attention, too, right?
Oh, yeah. Tons of accolades.
Like Teen Choice Awards, a Saturn Award for Tom Holland.
Yeah.
Those are great, but they're not exactly Oscars, right? Well, true, but those awards are more significant than they might seem.
Okay.
They show how broad the film's appeal was, Like, it wasn't just the niche thing. And the Saturn Awards, they're specifically for sci-fi, fantasy, superhero stuff.
Right.
So that's a big deal in that world.
So it was winning with the people, if not necessarily the, super serious critics.
Exactly.
And that lines up with the overall reception, too, right?
Oh, yeah. Homecoming got rave reviews. Critics loved it. They praised the humor, the action, the whole thing. 92% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Wow.
An A cinema score, So clearly it resonated with everyone.
Okay, so we've established that Spider-Man Homecoming was a hit.
For sure.
But how did it actually change the landscape of superhero movies?
Right.
I mean, this is the third Spider-Man reboot in 15 years.
Yeah, that's true.
What makes this one stand out?
Well, I think this one marked a whole new era for Spider-Man.
Okay.
Skipping the origin story, focusing on a younger Peter Parker, it just felt different, fresh. Yeah. And then putting him right in the MCU, that opens up so many possibilities.
It's like they honored his legacy, but pushed him in a new direction at the same time.
Exactly.
He's not just doing his own thing anymore. He's part of something bigger.
Right. And that sets the stage for some incredible stories.
For sure.
We see him learning from Tony Stark, making mistakes, and eventually becoming a key player in the whole Avengers thing.
Right.
Homecoming is the foundation for all of that.
It really is.
Yeah.
So what can we learn from Spider-Man Homecoming? It's more than just a superhero movie, right?
Oh, absolutely.
It's a coming-of-age story. It's funny. It's got this whole mentorship angle going on.
It works on so many levels.
Yeah, it's a reminder that superhero stories can be about more than just punching bad guys.
Right.
They can be about growing up, finding your place in the world, dealing with responsibility, all that stuff.
Exactly, which, let's be honest, we can all relate to.
Oh, yeah, even if our superpowers are a little more mundane. But before we get too deep into all that,
Okay.
let's take a moment to gather our thoughts.
Sure.
We've covered a lot. Casting, effects, marketing.
We have.
But we've only scratched the surface.
Yeah, there's so much more to explore.
When we come back, let's delve deeper into the themes, the symbolism,
Sounds good.
and how it all fits into the bigger picture of superhero movies.
Absolutely.
Stay tuned.
Welcome back.
Okay, so before the break, we were talking about how Homecoming kind of reinvented Spider-Man while still, keeping that classic Spidey feel.
Right, finding that balance.
Yeah, and looking through all these sources. What really struck me is just how many layers there are to this movie.
Oh, yeah.
It's not just about saving the world.
It's about growing up.
Exactly, like all those coming-of-age themes are woven right in.
For sure.
You see Peter dealing with high school, crushes, friendships.
Oh, that awkward stuff.
The works, and it's all tied into this need to prove himself.
Which, I mean, we can all relate to that, right?
Absolutely.
That feeling of wanting to show everyone what you're capable of.
Yeah, but for Peter, the stakes are a bit higher than just, like, failing a test or something.
That's an understatement.
Right. He's got these superpowers on top of all the normal teenage anxieties.
And the responsibility that comes with them.
Oh, yeah, the movie really explores that tension.
It does. It asks, what happens when you give a teenager the power to change the world?
And it's not like there's a manual for that.
Yeah.
He's making it up as he goes along, learning from his mistakes.
And sometimes those mistakes have big consequences.
Yeah, that's what makes his journey so interesting.
Really.
He's not some perfect superhero. He's flawed, impulsive.
Makes my day aches.
Yeah, and that actually makes him more relatable, I think.
For sure. He's figuring things out just like the rest of us.
Exactly. And then you throw Tony Stark into the mix.
Right. Iron Man himself.
As his mentor, which adds a whole other level to this.
Oh, it's fascinating, their relationship.
It's not your typical mentorship.
No, not at all.
There's respect there, but also tension.
Yeah, Tony wants to protect him, but he also pushes him, maybe a little too hard sometimes.
And it backfires. Like, Peter doesn't always listen, which leads to some pretty rough stuff.
Right, but it's through those mistakes that he really learns and grows.
Tough love superhero style.
Pretty much. But it's a reminder that mentorship isn't always easy.
Yeah, and that growth can be painful sometimes.
It can, but that's how we become stronger.
More resilient.
Better versions of ourselves.
And Homecoming shows us those moments, even the awkward ones.
Oh, yeah.
Like, remember when Peter gets stuck in the high school storage room?
Of course.
Talk about embarrassing.
This is perfect, right? You have these big superhero moments, and then these really relatable, funny teenage moments.
Keeps things grounded.
It does. It reminds us that even superheroes have those awkward moments.
Like, hey, you can swing through the city, fight robots.
But you're still going to trip over your own feet sometimes. And that's what makes the movie so endearing.
I think so, too.
It doesn't take itself too seriously. It embraces the humor, but it also explores those deeper themes,
Yeah, responsibility, identity.
Growing up, finding your place.
And it does all this while still fitting into the whole MCU.
Seamlessly.
I mean, Peter's world is directly affected by what happened in those other Avengers films.
Oh, absolutely.
Aliens, superheroes, the whole thing. It's not just background noise.
Right. It adds realism.
Yeah, Peter's not in a bubble. He's living in a world that's been changed by these crazy events.
And that affects everything. His choices, his perspective.
Even his relationship with Tony.
Of course, Tony isn't just a mentor. He's a symbol of that larger world.
The world Peter wants to be a part of.
Exactly. And that desire to prove himself to Tony.
It drives a lot of his actions.
Good and bad.
It's like, even with superpowers, you can still be insecure.
Especially when you're a teenager.
Yeah. And let's not forget the music.
Oh, the music's fantastic.
Michael Giacchino's score. It just fits perfectly.
It captures that youthful energy, the adventure.
Yeah, and they even snuck in that classic theme from the 60s cartoon.
I love that they did that.
Like a little wink to the fans.
A nod to the past, but also a signal that this is something new.
So we've talked story, characters, themes, even music.
What else is there?
What about the critics? How did they react to this new Spider-Man?
They loved it. Overwhelmingly positive reviews.
Really?
Oh, yeah. They praised the humor, the action, called it a fresh take on the character. And they loved how well it fit into the MCU.
Were there any, complaints?
There were a few. Some thought it relied too much on humor.
Okay.
maybe undercut some of the drama.
Makes sense.
Others thought the villains' motivations weren't explored enough or that they used too much CGI.
Right, right.
But overall, I think it's safe to say Homecoming was a success.
Yeah, commercially and critically.
It breathed new life into the franchise.
Introduced a whole new audience to Spider-Man.
And it proved that superhero movies can be smart, funny.
And still have that emotional depth.
Absolutely.
So where do we go from here? What's next for Spider-Man in the MCU?
That's the exciting part.
Right.
We know he pops up in some other Avengers movies.
Yeah, but what about his own solo adventures?
Well, that's the thing. Homecoming opens up so many possibilities.
Now that he's part of this bigger universe.
Exactly. He could team up with other heroes, fight new villains.
Explore different dimensions even.
The possibilities are endless.
It's like the future of Spider-Man is as big as the multiverse itself.
I like that.
But before we get too ahead of ourselves,
Sure.
let's just appreciate what Homecoming accomplished.
Yeah.
It brought the franchise back to life.
Introduce a new generation to the character.
And reminded us why we love Spider-Man in the first place.
Exactly.
It's a film that feels both timeless and timely,
It captures the essence of Spider-Man.
but also reflects those modern world complexities,
It's about responsibility, identity, growing up.
all wrapped up in this exciting superhero package.
Yeah.
And on that note, let's wrap up our deep dive into Spider-Man, Homecoming, and explore what makes it such an enduring and impactful film. Okay, so we're back and going through all this stuff on Spider-Man, Homecoming. It's been wild.
I bet.
It's like watching the movie with X-ray vision, you know?
I know what you mean.
You see all the work, the little decisions, the risks they took.
Yeah.
It makes you appreciate it on a whole other level.
It really does, right. It's easy to just focus on the final product.
Right.
But there's so much that goes into it.
And with Homecoming, specifically, it's clear they really cared about getting it right.
Oh, yeah. Every detail, from casting to the effects to how they marketed it.
And it paid off big time.
It did.
But what I keep coming back to is the impact it had. Like, we're still talking about it years later. Analyzing the themes, debating where it fits in the whole superhero genre.
Why do you think that is?
That's what I'm trying to figure out.
It's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, because it's more than just a fun superhero movie.
I think Homecoming tapped into something universal.
Great.
Something that goes beyond just the superhero stuff.
Like what?
It's a story about growing up, about finding your place in the world.
Right.
Dealing with responsibility, figuring things out.
Those are things everyone goes through.
Exactly, whether you're into comics or not.
It's about those awkward first steps into adulthood.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh, absolutely.
And it's cool to see that reflected in a superhero, especially one like Spider-Man.
I agree. And by putting him back in high school, it gives us a new perspective on the character.
We see him dealing with homework, crushes.
Even social anxieties, all while trying to figure out this whole superhero thing.
It's like even superheroes have normal problems.
Yeah, and it reminds us that being a hero isn't about being perfect.
It's about trying your best and learning from your mistakes.
Which, you know, can have some pretty big consequences in this movie.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
It's not all light and fun. There's real danger, real weight to Peter's actions.
And that gives it a certain depth, I think.
It does. We're not just watching a guy in a suit punch bad guys.
We're seeing this young man struggle with the impact of his choices.
And that's something that sticks with you.
It makes you think about your own choices. You know,
It does.
the consequences, what kind of person you want to be.
It's a powerful message, especially nowadays.
Yeah,
We're surrounded by these images of perfect, flawless heroes. But Homecoming shows us something different.
Real heroism.
Messy, imperfect.
Giving tough calls.
It's about the journey, not just the destination.
Speaking of journeys, I think it's time to wrap up our own little deep dive here.
Sounds good.
We've covered so much ground.
We have production, themes, the critical response, everything.
And I think we've shown that a superhero movie can be more than just a popcorn flick.
Oh, for sure.
It can make you think, make you feel.
Even challenge how you see the whole idea of heroism.
And I think that's what makes Spider-Man Homecoming so special.
It really is a unique film.
It's a story that stays with you, reminds you that even in a world of superheroes,
It's the human element that matters most.
So as we swing away from this deep dive,
Okay.
what other films deserve this kind of treatment?
Right. What stories have stuck with you, made you want to dig deeper?
Keep asking those questions, keep exploring, keep that curiosity going.
Until next time,